Gaby Gross, daughter of renowned physicist Rudolf Peierls, was born in England in 1933. She and her brother were evacuated from England due to a Nazi threat during World War II. Between September of 1940 and May of 1941, the Nazis bombed London 71 times, while Gaby's hometown of Birmingham was bombed 8 times. Just as the children of Narnia were evacuated to the countryside, Gaby and her brother Ronnie were evacuated to Canada. They were transported across seas to Montreal, where they stayed for a couple of years, separated from their parents and each other, each in a different host family. Gaby stayed with an affluent family of 4 in Montreal. Nancy, her host sisters, and her became close companions and classmates. She reunited with her parents in New York since her father, Rudolf Peierls, was working on the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project was a research and development program by the United States with the United Kingdom and Canada that produced the first atomic bomb during World War II. In Britain, Otto Frisch and Rudolf Peierls at the University of Birmingham had made a breakthrough investigating the critical mass of uranium-235 in June of 1939. Their calculations indicated that it was within an order of magnitude of 10 kilograms, which was small enough to be carried by a bomber of the day. Their March 1940 Frisch-Peierls Memorandum initiated the British Atomic Bomb Project and its Maud Committee, which unanimously recommended pursuing the development of an atomic bomb. The search for a suitable site was narrowed to the vicinity of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Thus, Rudolf, Gaby, and their family relocated to Los Alamos. Rudolf Peierls was a leading physicist in the development of the atomic bomb, working alongside Enrico Fermi. Notably, when the materials were shipped to build the Little Boy first nuclear bomb at Los Alamos, Rudolf Peierls assembled the bomb by hand. The Peierls and Fermi families were neighbors in Los Alamos. Gaby and her family lived there for a little while, attending school and living a socially isolated life. After World War II ended, the Peierls family returned to England. Gaby attended Oxford University to pursue a career in law. After retiring, Gaby moved to Gainesville and is now a leading local member of the Guardian Ad Litem program, a statewide partnership supporting children who are at risk, abused, or neglected.
A little bit about yourself.
Okay, my name's Gaby Gross, and my maiden name was Peierls. I was born in England, but very shortly after my parents arrived there. My mother was Russian, my father was German, and they were both Jewish, so when the war started, they were more afraid of an invasion, concentration camps. I don't know exactly how much people knew about concentration camps then, but so that's why they wanted us to be safe and out of the country.
So how old were you at the time of this?
I was 6, almost 7, and my brother was 4, almost 5. But just prior to that, the school we were going to in Birmingham, which is where we lived, the whole school was evacuated to a place in the country. You know, that was to be safe from bombs. So we had already spent some time away from home before. we actually went to Canada.
So why did you move to Canada and not some other country?
Well, the University of Toronto, they invited the people from the University of Birmingham and I think also the University of Oxford to either come themselves or send their children to Canada, and they would find homes for us.
So how are you transported from?
Well, we went by boat, and my brother and I shared a cabin with two girls who were maybe about 12. They tried to take care of us, and we were very insulted because we could take care of ourselves. But there were some older women, you know, some mothers went with their children that were also in the same group. And when we got to Canada, I think the boat probably arrived in Montreal. Or anyway, we went on a train, and I remember asking somebody where we were going, and they said Toronto. And my brother and I both thought that they said China. But we weren't it was all the same to us. So we went to Toronto. And we stayed in a we stayed in a convent for a little while they found homes for us. And it was summer, so that it was a convent school, wasn't in session.
So you stayed with a host family?
And then we stayed with the host family.
And were your brother and you were separated?
Right. My brother stayed with the father and his family was the brother of the mother and my family. So the family I stayed with, there was a girl who was a year older than me and a boy who was 6 years older who would tease us a lot and would sometimes... 3 children, I know, is always a problem. There's always 2 against 1 if you're not careful. So there was some of that. They were extremely wealthy, and they had a maid and a manservant and a chauffeur. And, you know, I wasn't used to anything like that, but I guess it didn't seem that strange. I think the mother had inherited money, and the father, you know, I found out later, had married her somewhat to the disapproval of her family. The mother, she didn't work. Well, not many mothers did those days. And she was always saying she had 3 major operations, so she couldn't do this and that. I never quite understood what they were. She'd have breakfast in bed and we'd go off to school. One thing, you know, compared to now, we would be out the whole day and nobody really cared as long as we came back for dinner. You know, nobody worried about where we were or who we were seeing and stuff like that. Eventually the help, the butler and the maid, I think they got sick and they couldn't work anymore. And then it got to be hard to get help. So they sent us, the 2 girls, off to boarding school. And actually went to 2 different schools. I was upset at that because Nancy went to the school that my foster mother had gone to. It's kind of a prestigious school in Birmingham. And I went to another. And they said it was because there was no room in the other one. And I must have complained a lot because after 1 semester, I then went to the same one as Nancy. We were in the same grade. Actually, my mother was very pushy. She pushed me ahead 2 years, and Nancy was ahead 1 year. We ended up in the same grade. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it. But then after I was at that school for the second school for a semester, my parents came over and picked us up, and we went to live in New York.
And so as a child, did you realize that there was a threat, or how did you feel about the whole operation?
A threat, you mean, of the war?
Of the war.
Well, at first we didn't. I remember when I was still in Birmingham, the war was announced, and we didn't know what a war was. And I remember asking the teacher, and he said, it's like a fight, but there's a lot of people fighting each other. So a group of us started pretending to fight each other. I said, oh, this is a war. I think later on I had a better idea of what it was. Very different things.
What was it like for your father being a German Jew?
Well, it was complicated because, he had not gone back to Germany for obvious reasons. And he and another German, I don't think the other German wasn't Jewish, maybe, they were not allowed to work on secret, work that scientists were doing. He was a physicist. So he and the other man were working on atomic energy. And they found that, in fact, you needed a lot less uranium than had been thought, and that it was possible to make a bomb. So they wrote this up. It was called the Frisch-Peierls Memorandum, and they gave it to their colleagues, their British colleagues, who sent it to the authorities. And at first they were not allowed to work on the project because they're enemy aliens, but eventually they realized that didn't make much sense. So they ended up working on that project. Well, it was kind of strange. It was a very beautiful place. There weren't many kids my age who were children of scientists. They were mostly much younger, the children of scientists. So the children at the school were children of technicians or even of janitors and people. So my social life was very difficult. I was 12 at the time. Wanted to be accepted by people, and my school experience wasn't very good. Although we did have some good teachers. Some of the teachers were wives of the physicists. And the only bad teacher was the science teacher. Our family lived underneath the Fermi family, and so Nella Fermi their daughter became my best friend. She was a little older than me. And there were these army houses, 2 up and 2 down. And she and I discovered we could talk to each other through the heat registers.
So can you explain a little bit more about your situation at Los Alamos? So,
how do you mean?
So you were there because your father was...
My father was working on the atomic bomb.
Working on the bomb. And so you were living in like a community with other scientists?
Oh yeah, there's a lot. It was a whole big community. I grew up there very quickly. It was originally a boys' school. And there were some old, nice log-built buildings. That's where the most prodigious people lived. It was called Bathtub Row because it was the only place that had bathtubs. The rest of us had showers.
Was your host family Jewish too, or?
No. And then I began to feel uncomfortable because I think in Canada, they were somewhat anti-Semitic, They knew I was Jewish, but, occasionally they would drop some words about people in the neighborhood or something.
Did they volunteer to be a host family? Or
oh, yeah,
required?
Of course, yeah.
Oh, okay. So did your father get a job in New York, or why New York?
Well, he was part of after, I don't know what point this happened, he came over a couple of times, and I guess he was meeting with scientists and people in America. Of course, it was all secret. We didn't know why he was over, but he did actually come and see us. So the whole operation moved from England to America.
Can you talk a little bit more about your father's work in that operation in general? Or at least what you knew about it at the time?
Oh, I didn't know anything about it at the time.
And you found out all this later?
Yeah.
So what did your father do? Can you talk more about that? You said he worked on the atomic bomb?
Yeah, he did. It was the Manhattan Project. So he was there for 6 months in New York. And then we all went to Los Alamos and he worked there. He was head of the theoretical division. I guess he wasn't head, Beta was head, but that's where he worked in theoretical physics.
So he helped develop the atomic bomb?
Yeah, well, he was one of the first people to say it was possible with that.
Did your mother know what he was doing, or did he not tell her?
She probably did. I mean, she wouldn't have admitted it, but, at the beginning it wasn't even secret. It was new. Probably many of the wives there knew, but they weren't supposed to. Actually, another thing he did, he was a volunteer fireman, so I think every third night or something he'd go to the fire station and help put out fires, caused by the bombs.
Was Was your family in Britain ever close to being like in danger or anything during the war?
No, they weren't. I think once there was a fire in a paint factory, and some of the firemen got stuck in the paint and perished there. I don't know how close. My father talked about it. I don't know how close he actually was. Okay, when the thing about being a foster child, there was some things I really only thought about later. Was when I was working as a lawyer for a social service agency in New Jersey, and one of the trials, an expert was talking about how children are affected by being removed from their parents. I was thinking, oh yeah, that is right. You know, this sort of feeling not connected to anyone. Although, you know, my circumstances were different from theirs. It wasn't anybody's fault that I was moved or anything like that. But it made me kind of rethink the whole experience.
Since you didn't have your birth parents with you, was it hard to just take responsibility? Or, I mean, since you didn't have that much influence, like parental influence, like, was it hard for you to grow up maturely, or was it just, did it not affect you or anything?
Well, my foster parents were influencing me. It, you know, teach me manners, educating me, stuff like that.
About your foster father, what did he do?
I think he worked for a brick company. I think he sold bricks. I was never quite clear.
And how did he shape your experience at all? You haven't talked much about him.
He was sort of warmer than his wife was. You tend not to remember the day-to-day things. You just remember sort of things that hit you as strange at the time. But I remember once we were in the car, and he asked a question, something about to the two children here, and Nancy didn't answer. So I said something like, "Yes, child," and he thought I was answering him, which would have been very fresh. So he slapped me in the face. You know, I remember that because it was so unfair, but he normally wasn't. He was normally quite reasonable. Well, that was a thing that used to bother my foster mother. I would say, "That's not fair." And she got so annoyed that she told me not to say it anymore.
So they treated you like one of their own
Oh, yeah.
children.
Well, it might have been harder for my foster sister to have a stranger, you know, to have someone else come in. But she liked the company, so... Thank you.